as the pictures and the names come in, as they came in before Shabbos, already Friday morning, Erev Shabbos, some more Motzah Shabbos, names that we do recognize, names we don't recognize. It's irrelevant really, because it's all mishpacha, they're all Yidden, they're part of us. It feels like part of our mishpacha. Some of them are familiar names, some of them are familiar faces. Sometimes, oh, I remember him. It's so difficult. 45 people. That means there are 45 families that have changed forever. Hundreds, if not thousands of people will be changed because of this. Children will grow up without a father. A wife will have to continue the family without her husband. Siblings, children. To see an image of a father giving a hesped at his son's levaya is something that we should never know of, we should never see. Many of you saw images of things that you should never see and nobody should see. Images of bodies, images of the chaos, which I'm sure is inside, but it's important to express. And the big question is why? Why? Lag ba'omer. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai Meron. This is Reb Shimon's day, all the stories we've heard of tzaddikim that would run in with children that died, and Reb Shimon, you've got to do this with my child, and Tchias HaMesim. The miracles that we heard that went on in Lag ba'omer, the Yeshuas that people got by Reb Shimon. It doesn't make sense. How do we process this? What are we meant to be thinking? What is our avodah at this time? What's our reaction to such a tragedy? And yes, there are people that are busy pointing fingers. It's this fault. It's because of this. There was a slippery, and because they closed the gate and they weren't watching and they pleaded. It's all a distraction. It's natural. We're a human being. We like to look at this. We like to understand. It's all a distraction. It's not what we're meant to be thinking. That's not our job. Maybe at one point someone has to deal with that, but that's not for us. That's not for us to figure out why it happened. Our reaction has to be of a Yid. How does a Yid react in such a situation? Moshe Rabbeinu, as the Medrash tells us very clearly, Shemos Rabbah, asked the Rabbeinu Shalom, Hareini noes kvoidecha, show me your glory, which the Medrash understands, the Gemara brings it. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to understand, why is it that good people have such hard lives? These are good people. These are tzaddikim. They did good things. These were koilel people. These were avrechim. These were tamidei chachomim. These were people sitting and learning. They came to Reb Shimon to daven. They came to Reb Shimon to get a Yeshua, to get close to the Rabbeinu Shalom. That's why they came. They didn't come for the party. They came to get closer to Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu grappled with this question, and he begged the Rabbeinu Shalom, explain to me, help me. I don't understand the world. And what did the Rabbeinu Shalom respond? It's impossible. A human being cannot comprehend how I run the world. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to you. And not only that, Chazal tell us, but the Asor Rugei Malchus, that when they wanted to understand by Rabbi Kiva, famous, Rabbi Kiva died the most gruesome death, a horrible, horrible way of dying. And the Malachim started screaming, Rabbeinu Shalom, what is this? This is Rabbi Kiva, Talmidei Chachomim, 24,000 Talmidim, look what he did to the world, the Torah that came down because Rabbi Kiva, this is how he died. How does that make sense? And you know what the Rabbeinu Shalom said? There is no way you can understand. The only way you will understand if I take apart the entire world from the beginning of time until now, to completely take it apart and have to put it back together again. That's the only way you'll understand. You won't understand. And that's how a Yid has to live. And that's our reaction to tragedy. Our reaction is exactly that. We don't understand. We don't need to understand. When Rav Shimshon Pinkus Zatzal died in a car crash, together with his wife, together with his daughter, right before Pesach 2001, You can imagine the Torah world was devastated. Rav Shimshon Pinkus was mamash. You see all the sforim, all the tapes, how much Torah he gave to the world, what he did. They were devastated. Rav Shimshon Pinkus, his wife and his daughter in the same car, killed instantly. How can this be? Rav Shimshon Pinkus, his father, Rav Avram Zatzal, a tremendous Talmud Chacham. In fact, he was one of the few Bochrim that went from America to the Meir Yeshiva in Poland. And he stood up at his son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter's levaya. Strength that takes. And he stood up by that levaya, and he stunned the crowd with the following. And he said, when a person is delving into a sugya, when a person is trying to figure out a pshat and a tosfos, what does he do? Can't figure it out. Go over it again. Still can't figure it out. Go over it again. And if you still can't figure out what pshat is, what do? You go weiter. You move on. Said Rabbi Shimshon Pinkus Zatzal's father, with bitter tears, said, Rabbeinu Shalom, I don't understand pshat. It's a shvere tosfos. But if we can't understand, we go weiter. That's how it is. That's a Yid's response to tragedy. That's a Yid's response. It's almost like a person walks into a cockpit. He walks into a cockpit of an aeroplane and he says to the pilot, tell me something. What does that button over there do? And the pilot looks at him and he laughs. He says, that button, you have to understand. That button goes together with that button that goes to... It's a whole series. It's not what does that do. We can't ask the Ribbono Shel Olam why this happened. There's a whole bigger picture that we're not a part of. But we have to go on. We have to understand there's a Borei Olam. There's Hashgacha Pratis. There's everything in the world that the Ribbono Shel Olam put into this world from the beginning of time until the end of time, that the Ribbono Shel Olam understood and planned, that everything is going according to his plan, capital H. We, as human beings, cannot simply comprehend it. That's our reaction. We're on this world for a mere 120 years. 120 years. What do we understand? We don't understand. But that's our avodah. And that's our reaction. To understand this, it's impossible. There's no one in this generation that can tell you why. But there's got to be an understanding that Ribbono Shel Olam is running the world. And it will be such a shame to let this opportunity pass. The world is a different world now. Lag Ba'omer Tovshin Pei Aleph took place, and it's something that none of us will ever forget, and none of us should ever forget. We have to live differently. We have to do things differently. Otherwise it would be a waste. There's obviously a message. What it is, nobody can tell you. But it means the Ribbono Shel Olam is shouting. The Ribbono Shel Olam is shouting. There's something there. We have to do something. And I just want to end with one incredible story just to show you how the Ribbono Shel Olam runs the world. And again, it doesn't answer what happened. We're not looking to answer. But just because we're human beings and we like to understand some idea. So I want to give you a story that took place. There was a city about an hour away from France that was not zoicha to have its own mikveh. And because it wasn't zoicha to have its own mikveh, it was very difficult for the women over there to practice taharas mishpacha, to go to mikveh, to go traveling an hour there to France, an hour back. Some of them didn't want to do it, some of them did want to do it. It was always a challenge. So there was a Yid over there. His name was Dov Mizra. Dov Mizra lived in a small community, and he decided, if no one's doing something about this, I'm doing something about it. I'm taking the matter into my own hands. He lived in a small community. He said, you know what? I'm going to build this mikveh with my own bare hands. He had a small part of land at the back of his garden, which he didn't really want to use, an entrance to the street. He said, perfect, this will be the mikveh. It took him 3.5 years. He didn't have any fancy tools or contractors. He literally dug it with his own hands with a spade and a bucket, and eventually brought in people to do tiles, and eventually he figured it out. After that amount of time, the mikveh was built al pi halacha. They got Rabbanim to come and inspect it, and it was an incredible, incredible thing. They had a mikveh now in this community. What mysterious nefesh, years of work, a lot of money spent, a lot of effort to make this mikveh. Now, because it was in his backyard, he made sure that it was, it was a private place. It was tedious. Nobody saw who went in, who went out. But one thing he had to make sure of, that the door was always closed. Hey, after all, he had kids, and he wanted to make sure that nobody goes in. So he always made sure, big signs there, make sure the door of the mikveh remains closed at all times. Closed and locked. The bolt was on the top, no child could reach it, perfect. Okay. The day came, unfortunately, where the unthinkable happened. And this year, Dov had a son called Shlomo. Shlomo was once playing in the backyard. He was 1 year and 3 months old. He was playing in the backyard. The door to the mikveh was obviously left open. And the beautiful child found a way into the mikveh. He must have tripped on the stairs, because an hour later when they came to look for the child, they found him at the bottom of the mikveh and he was no longer alive. Dov and Esther and the rest of their 9 children, 9 sons, were totally broken. How could it be? We were moist nefesh for mikveh. Look what we did, Taharas Yisrael. We helped Yidden. We helped women go to the mikveh. We did everything for purity, and this is our reward? How does that make sense? They couldn't deal with it. They couldn't deal with it. How could someone, and the whole community was at loss, someone that had done such mesiras nefesh for a mitzvah, lost their precious child through that mitzvah, in that very mikveh? They wanted to accept it, but they struggled. It was very, very difficult. Dov, the father, flew to Eretz Yisrael with his son's very, very tiny little coffin. And after burying his child on Har Menuchos, he traveled back to France, where him and his wife and his 9 boys now, he did have 10, were mourning and sitting shiva for the loss of their son and sibling. And people were always saying that, wow, you've got 10 sons, wherever you go, you have a minyan, it's incredible. And now they felt like they were incomplete. They only had 9 sons. A short while after he came home, Dov had a dream in which an old man with a white beard spoke to him and introduced himself as one of the Balei Tosfos. And this Balei Tosfos told Dov that I had given my life al Kiddush Hashem. I died at the time of the Crusades. I was killed, and I gave my life to Kiddush Hashem. And as soon as he heard that, Dov woke up in a sweat. What was that? That was a horrible dream. Okay, it's gone. Went back to sleep. He saw the man again, and the man said, don't worry, it's okay. I'm just coming here to tell you and explain to you the recent events. He said, when I was killed many years ago, I came to Shamayim and I ascended to the highest levels where no one else was able to ascend, because I had died that type of death, the highest form of death. But when I reached the very highest level, they wouldn't let me go up anymore. The angels, the malachim, informed me that since I had never received a tahara, I had never gone to the mikveh after my death, because when a person is killed with blood all over him, they don't dip him into the mikveh. So because of that, I wasn't able to ascend any higher, because I didn't receive a purification. The man with the white beard continued to speak. He said, in Shamayim, the heavenly court informed me that in order to reach the last level, I would have to descend one more time in this world. I would have to immerse myself one time in a kosher mikveh. And the Rabbi Shalom knew of the mesiras nefesh that you had for that mikveh. It was the purest mikveh in the world. And the Rabbi Shalom said, I want to send you down to that mikveh. And at the age of 1 year and 3 months, I got my purification. And he said, and he ended the dream and said, just so you should know this dream is true, I promise you that at the end of the year, you'll be blessed with a daughter. Just under a year, Dov and Esther were blessed with a baby girl, their very first daughter, after 10 boys. The story was told over by someone that saw the mikveh and met the little girl born a year after the tragedy. Dov told him the entire story and instructed him to repeat it every time that he heard that a young child had died. It doesn't give us any answers, but it tells us one thing, that the Rabbi Shalom runs the world in a perfect manner. We don't understand, we don't need to understand. We just have to know that the Rabbi Shalom runs the world.